good morning to all four of you. I know that Josephine and Marnie are running late. They got stuck in traffic.
There's major traffic out there, major traffic.
Major traffic, yeah. So people will probably come trickling in. This is not meant to be a long meeting. This should be really short. I'm actually going to step out shortly because I have to go to a pension meeting. But basically, I wanted to introduce Tanya, who's our assistant counsel. Tanya Cantlapacchio, she's been working with me for the last year, and she'll be taking primary responsibility for the Borough Service Cabinet moving forward. Now, obviously, still be around, but she'll be taking the primary lead on that. So the point of today is we kind of want to get up to speed on what you guys have been doing the last year. I know you did a lot of work with Diana. Though we didn't get that much information in terms of what was left outstanding or what projects were completed or finished. So we want to kind of get up to speed as to where things are and what are the next items on the agenda that you as DMs kind of want to tackle. And like we did in the past, we'll just lay out a strategy to systematically start tackling them one at a time. We're going to keep the same system, the DM only meetings with the full meetings every couple months. I think that works. I assume that still works for you guys. And so we'll kind of follow the same format and the same structure. But this is kind of an open conversation. So I think to start, it'd be helpful just to kind of hear what's been going on the last year, what issues you guys have worked on and resolved, worked on and not resolved, and what other things are pending.
Everybody wants to speak at once.
Perfect timing. Look at that.
All right, so
We just adjourned. We're done. You guys just.
Well, if you get signed in, so.
Yeah, at least you get credit for it, right?
Mostly budget strategies that we work for our district needs statements.
So I'll just wait till
Yeah.
they get settled in, and I'll give a short version of my spiel so they can hear it.
I remember you.
You remember me? And, I thought because I'd be coming back, you guys would be here early, first thing, waiting at the door before I walked in.
First of all, we didn't know you were coming back. It's a welcome surprise. But honestly, I left on time.
Oh, there's bad traffic.
Yeah. Trains, planes, and automobiles. So I am sorry.
No, that's okay.
You
So
might have-
we literally just started right before you guys walked in, but I'll kind of give you the Cliff Notes version. So we're back. We're taking back over the Borough Service Cabinet. This is Tanya Cantlapacchio, our assistant counsel. She'll be taking over primary responsibility for the Borough Service Cabinet moving forward. And the point of today should be really short and sweet. We just kind of want to get up to speed as to what you guys have done in the last year, what issues have been resolved, what issues you've worked on that are not resolved, and kind of map out a strategy for what we want to tackle the coming year. And we're going to follow the same format we have in the past, where we do the DM only meetings and then the big meetings every couple months. That seemed to work last time. I think it still worked even when I wasn't around. So we'll stick with that strategy. But yeah, I'll just throw it open and kind of let us know what's going on. I have to leave in a few minutes, but Tanya will be here to kind of facilitate our conversation, and then we'll just go from there.
all right. So one of the issues we've been working on is Laura said we're working on budget, but we're always working on budget. One of the big issues we've been working on is getting software for the community board offices. The borough president has sent a letter to the mayor asking him to include funding in the FY19 budget, actually in the FY20 budget for the same organization that did for Manhattan, Borough President Gail Brewer, which is Boardstat, and the borough president sent a letter, and all the Brooklyn community boards signed on to that letter asking the mayor for $250,000 to implement Boardstat in Brooklyn.
Is that 250 for all boards or per board?
No, for all boards.
Okay.
So that grant, I don't remember the name of the organization.
It's Noel Hidalgo's group, right?
Oh, Beta NYC.
Yeah.
Yeah, Betty NYC. With the The board stat program is not the end game. The end game is really to have a constituent service system.
CRM,
But this is a start, and we really are thankful for the borough president to taking this to the mayor and have the funds included in the next fiscal budget. So we would like for Borough Hall to continue working on that and see it through to its implementation.
Okay. When was that letter sent out, do you know?
A month
ago.
A couple weeks ago?
Recent.
Okay. Okay. What else?
There was one thing that they mentioned that we were going to do, but we didn't have a chance to do it, was to visit 311. We were doing a field trip, actually.
Field trip to 311?
Yeah, so I thought that was going to be nice, but it never came about because whatever happened, and it just put off. But I thought that would have been nice to see, or let them hear our problems when we communicate with 311 and how they could expedite our problems better than, saying we're just another agency.
I know at one point we had a bunch of discussions around 311 and then with the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, and there was some issues in terms of kind of matching up what was going into the 311 system and then kind of dealing with it on the back end. Have those issues been resolved or fixed, or I know there was some confusion about how calls going in were maybe miscatalogued or issues miscatalogued, and the tracking numbers that you were getting were different than, or the agencies were giving you were different than what the 311 system had. Have those things been resolved, or
No.
those things
No,
still?
it's the same.
There really hasn't been any follow-up
Hasn't been any follow-up.
on
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
I think partly because there are complications that are sort of rational complications, but we don't necessarily have a firm understanding of what those are. But because it is like that, I feel like this is the sort of issue that just needs, we will never get it resolved. We will improve it, and then something else will come up, but it just feels like one of those things that just has to stay in the wheelhouse, kind of permanently, and just needs constant care. That, and then and the other place where I don't feel like we've gotten very far is with DEP notifications.
Really? Oh, that breaks my heart. We tried so hard on that.
Yeah, it breaks your heart and it drives me crazy. So like together we're a sad case. But they say they do notify us. So they, anyway, we've got to assess that one out. And then can I add a new one?
And this is, so DEP, is this the same exact issue on the planned work? Or is it other manifestations of the notification issue? It's planned work. Okay.
Also with DEP, it's notification of planned work and then actually DDC doing the work within the time that they notified us of. So we have in our board, a lot of times, they'll have a notification for work to be done from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. and they're out there at 4 a.m. Even to the degree of bringing out fog lights to accommodate the work. So residents in that area, and this is for the Nehemiah homes, the last phase of the Spring Creek Nehemiahs, where now you have an area that was once undeveloped, and you have Gateway Elton development there with over 500 residents, Nehemiah Homes, Gateway Mall, and then residents are being bombarded with work at 4 a.m., fog lights shining in their window, and it's just ridiculous.
These.
May I add one about agenda setting that's more about Borough Hall?
Sure.
If
Is it a positive or a negative?
you decide. Going forward, if there is an agency, a group, some entity that comes to you and asks if they can present to Borough Service Cabinet meetings, is there a way to run it by us? Because we kind of got a little bit, what I felt a little sideswiped by a couple of agenda items fairly recently that I didn't think was useful. And this time is so precious. I mean, we really, it's hard for us all to be, clearly it's hard for us to all get here. But it just was, Airbnb was the one topic that really kind of caught my ire.
Okay.
So, I mean, if that's not plausible and there's a really good reason for you to put it on the agenda, you feel like it's important or it's something that the borough president is keen on us knowing about, that's one thing. But some of them seem arbitrary and like you're just, somebody's requested and you're giving them the form.
I think for the most part, when I was doing in the past, we tried to limit it to agencies that had either specific things they wanted to announce or share. So that stuff I think was kind of just automatically relevant, right? Because it's all information sharing. The outside partners, I think, obviously got to be vetted a little bit more.
Yeah, we've had a few of those over the years that were like, what are they doing here?
Okay, that's good to know. So for our late arrivals, Josephine, Marnie.
No, we were all late too, we just got here.
Andrew.
I threw you under the bus a little bit, Josephine. I said, my own district manager wasn't here to greet me at 8 o'clock in the morning when the building opened up, It's very, very heartbroken.
And just to add to what Sean said
Yeah.
about notification, I have more of a problem with National Grid in my district than with DAP. First of all, it's two points. Number one, and I've brought this up a few times. It's the notification, and it's open-ended. When we do get the notification, we're going to work for 3 months. And what's the project? How's it going to be done? How many streets are going to be affected? None of that. We're going to work and take out the 3-month permit, and we'll come and go as we please, which leads me to the second part, which is the sensitive times in the district, which we don't want them to work. And we've been trying to get DOT to, that community board should have the ability to say no to certain times, reasonable, but to say no. As of right now, DOT is not doing that, but at least the utility company should at least have a dialogue with the community board regarding certain times that are sensitive in the district. Like for me, Friday afternoon, just last week, Hallam, which is a subcontractor for National Grid, shut down 13th Avenue and 48th Street. And anybody who knows Borough Park, it's like shutting down 5th Avenue, so on a Friday afternoon, which is ridiculous. And the entire district came to a standstill, literally. So for now, we can't put a moratorium on work with DOT saying do not approve permits in my district for Friday afternoons. We can't do that, but at least if we can force, I don't know if that's possible, the utility companies to come to the table and discuss this with us and come to some sort of agreement. They've been better, like Passover's coming now, so they've been better with the major events in the district, but something like a Friday afternoon or something like that, that they just don't seem to and that's what we're working on for years now, that they should at least come to the community board and include us in the process, in the planning of the big projects. I mean, they're literally living in my district now for the last 4 years, so.
Let me that's actually a good point. This is the last thing I'll say before I have to head out. There are monthly coordination meetings. I think they actually happen across the street. We talked about this once before.
Yeah, with DOT.
Are you guys able to attend those meetings?
We're not invited to those.
Huh?
We're not invited to those.
Okay.
We're not invited.
Okay. I'm sorry. Right. They used to. I remember that's how this first came up. Right. Okay.
DDC would invite us to big projects in the district, those interagency coordination meetings and that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, but National Grid doesn't go through DDC.
They were there, National Grid was also
Well, this
They
is, I'm
were?
talking about the meeting that all, it's supposed to be like DDC, DOT, DEP, and they're supposed to have the utilities there, and they basically, roll out a map and say, you're going here on this day, you're going here on this day. So you guys are just not in those meetings, not part of those
So
conversations.
that's your mission, to get us
In those
to those
door.
meetings.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
So I'm going to step out. Tanya will continue to stay here. So just keep other ideas or other issues. It would be helpful if at the conclusion of the meeting, I know in the past we had a working document that you guys created that kind of outlined these issues in greater detail. So if at the end of the meeting you guys kind of divvy up some of these specific issues and kind of add some more flesh to the bones for us, this way we can kind of start diving in and start trying to, make some progress on these things with you all. That'd be really helpful, okay? Tanya's in capable hands, and I will see you all next month. Thank you.
Okay. Before we continue, this is your first meeting? Shouldn't we all introduce ourselves?
Oh, that's a great idea. I didn't think about that.
Viola Green Walker at CD 16, Ocean Hill, Brownsville.
Henry Butler, Community Board 3, Bedford Stuyvesant.
Sean Campbell, 14, Flatbush Midwood. Nice to meet you.
Eddie Mark, Community Board 13, Coney Island and Brighton Beach.
Melinda Perkins, Community Board 5.
Marnie Elias Pavia, Community Board 11, Bath Beach and Bensonhurst.
I'm Josephine Beckman, Community Board 10, Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights, and Fort Hamilton.
Celeste Leon, Community Board 4, Bushwick.
Sherry Fraser, Community Board 17, East Flatbush.
Laura Singer, Community Board 15, Sheepshead Bay, Manhattan Beach, Garrettson Beach.
I know you.
Barry Spencer, Community Board 12. Tanya's our representative from Borough Hall to our board.
Yes. And again, I'm Tanya Cantlow-Cockfield, Assistant Counsel to the Borough President. I've been here about 3 years. I was in the policy unit, but I've been working with Andrew for the past year. So good to meet you, and be nice to me. Okay. So we'll just continue the conversation. Does anyone else have anything?
Could I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure Josephine was up to speed that we did bring up the DEP notification issue, and the sense, my sense is that it's gone nowhere. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't.
That's a consensus.
Yeah. And there's no reason for it not to be anywhere. We should have it. There's no reason that it should stop, and there's no reason why the changes that were promised were
Just to piggyback on what Barry was talking about with the utility companies, at one point I believe we were having meetings where we were having certain agencies come in, and the focus of that meeting was on those specific agencies. So I'm still putting my request in to have the meeting focusing on the utility companies, National Grid and Con Ed. One of the main topics of concern is the private contractors that they hire.
Yeah.
Hallen being National Grid, and
They're
the
bad.
disrespect that they have for the communities and the lack of accountability from the utility companies, trying to negotiate with the utility companies on what's going on with the private contractors that they're using, and what policies do they have in place, to make sure that the community is being fully respected by the work, the necessary work that has to be done, but it has to be done with the level of respect, because we have major issues with particularly Hallen, who's a contractor for National Grid. So that's my request. We have a meeting focusing on utility companies, National Grid and Con Ed.
And they use two subcontractors, Hallen and New York Paving,
New York Paving?
and they're both bad. But Hallen is the worst.
Yes.
And I've spoken to Keith, Borough Commissioner, DOT, and he has expressed frustrations to me about Hallen, so DOT is also frustrated about them. They do work without permits sometimes. They don't keep to.
They don't do notifications. We've actually had to have a meeting with the council member and our assembly member and bring Hallen in with National Grid. But like I said, I'm obviously listening to Barry. It's just not in my district. It's going on in certain parts of Brooklyn that this is happening. So also put down to have the private contractors at that meeting also.
Yeah.
One of the things that Keith said to me at one point was that these contractors are sort of this contracting version of too big to fail. They have so many contracts in the city that if they get yelled at about one thing, they kind of can be punitive about not working on that and go somewhere else and do other work. And so there is, and I think the same thing I read in the paper about the transit, that there are so few people who bid on these contracts that then they can kind of,
That's because they're going for the lowest bidder. So yes,
So
that,
this might be a process and policy discussion.
but that,
too.
no, but that's why I'm saying that, all right, to deal with the immediate issues that are going on, yes, that needs to be dealt with here. To deal with what you're talking about, that needs to be dealt with our elected officials, Borough Hall, City Hall. And as to why they're
They're gonna have to
only.
raise it up onto the
Right,
radar.
they're gonna have, right, and they need to deal with the fact that you just can't be going with the lowest bidder, but who's actually going to get the work done? So, yeah, that's a separate discussion that you're talking about.
So had the request been made already to meet with them?
No.
Prior to- So this is the
No.
first time? Okay.
We spoke with some of the agencies, and they said they were giving them sensitivity training.
Yeah.
National Grid, yeah.
Sensitive.
But we've never had National Grid and Con Ed here to deal with that issue, with their contractors to deal with that
We
specific.
did have National
We had
Grid a
National
couple
Grid here,
meetings.
yeah.
Yeah, down in the courtroom,
We had National Grid here.
This year, in
And they
2017.
spoke about how they were giving us training and,
Right. The contractor wasn't here.
right,
Okay.
supervisors for their companies, for their utilities.
So you want the utility and the contract? Okay.
See, the thing is, like, when I have a problem, I have to call National Grid. They have to get to whoever's doing the work, who has to get to the crew, who has to get to the, and by the time, it can be a day later that I get an answer. Or minimum 3, 4, 5 hours till somebody can let me know something. Last year, even during Passover, National Grid was like, yes, we had an agreement, and Sean and I sent them, a grid of where
Moratorium.
moratorium, no work. They were working on the eve of Passover. They were working on 12th Avenue and on 13th Avenue on the eve of Passover, and I called National Grid, and she's good. And she said, no, can't be. Can't be they're working. Until I went out and I took a picture of a open street and closed, and she couldn't believe it. She came down herself because she couldn't believe it. So
There's a disconnect somewhere
Yeah.
going on.
The other issue with them is they leave debris, so when they do finish a job, I'm inundated with customers calling me because they can't park, their driveways are blocked, they've left all kinds of debris behind, which I mentioned at the last meeting, but it still seems to be occurring.
Okay.
Some sanitation garages, and I won't say which, have been getting rid of some of these job sites, the debris and the sawhorses left behind.
I'm not that lucky, but okay. Fits now.
One of these days, I'm going to buy a pickup. I'm just going to buy a pickup truck.
I was going to
Sure.
say
Cameras rolling.
Sorry. I haven't done it yet.
that with National Grid, maybe we should have DOT at the table, because at the end of the day, these utility companies are accountable to the city, to DOT. They need to comply with their permits. And that ultimately who oversees the work on our streets. So maybe we need to bring DOT back in, because I can tell you from my district, there's blanket permits issued. And it really looks like the Wild West. There's local law 30 work being done, there's upgrade work being done, there's emergency work being done, and that's only National Grid. We haven't even moved on to Con Ed or Cablevision or the telephone company.
Or building construction.
Yeah, I'm just talking about street work. And I think we need to have a real understanding of how these permits are issued and who's enforcing the steps of those permits.
I mean, the real answer to that is, and that will have to come legislatively, is that community boards should be able to issue a moratorium and tell DOT do not issue work permits on these days, obviously within reason.
Right.
And that probably will have to come legislatively, because I've spoken to Polly Trottenberg, and she told me she's going to help me with this issue, but DOT just continues to issue, open-ended
Exactly.
permits for 3 months, 4 months, whenever, and I was looking at a permit a couple of months ago, was during the last holidays season, and there was a permit was issued, and one of the stipulations, you know, on the second page, you have the stipulations, oh, work should not be done during moratorium. Like,
That's right.
if there's a moratorium, there shouldn't be a permit. But there's a permit, and then there's stipulation, oh, don't work during the moratorium. So nobody listens to that. When there's a stipulation, do not block 2 lanes, right? They go ahead and they block 2 lanes. I mean, we have to have a vehicle to enforce these.
But there are inspectors that are supposed to do that through DOT, through HIQA. I mean, we've been successful in doing that. That's why I think maybe they need to be at the table too, to have this discussion, because at the end of the day, we can call National Grid in, but they are not accountable to us. They'll do it as a courtesy. But I find that I haven't been successful in resolving issues. I mean, they say the work needs to be done, and we'll tell the contractor the concerns, but then DOT gives a permit and nobody enforces that permit. And you know, you must have 50 locations within Community Board 12 where they're doing active projects. I think there needs to be more support from DOT in ensuring that there's compliance with those permits.
And
That's
also
just
the
a thought.
planning of these projects. I mean, they
Yes.
have now, they're working on
Blankets.
16th Avenue and on 13th Avenue, the 2 major, you know, commercial thoroughfares, you know, and it's,
Right, we talked about that once before. This was in the context of DEP permits, that they will put several jobs on one permit, and then they don't know which order the contractor is going to, or there might be an order established, but the contractor will go out to Site A, and there'll be something in their way, so they'll just, on their own accord, decide to go and switch the order of the permit. So, and then DEP doesn't know where they are.
So long-term, I would like to ask, it seems as if it's individual districts, and I know every district is different, and relationships are different in every district, but is there a way that the community board can be included in the process of the permit going out? Some documentation that comes from the board? Because it seems as though there's not enough inclusion from what we know needs to happen within our districts when these permits are issued. So it's always an afterthought, which is an after fight to get something corrected once it's been stamped and approved. So I think it's just a matter of having a community board input portion. I don't know how it would work, or
that will have to be done legislatively. DOT will not do it with, you know, their own
None of these
free will.
agencies. That
come from here. This is something that we're all asking to be flushed out in some office to see how it can actually be written out and presented on a council level.
Really, my council member this is a major issue for him, and I've spoken to him already a few times about it, and I think he's going to be introducing a legislation to that effect, so
we should all be speaking to our
council members and have them co-sponsor the bill, yes. I'm pretty sure DOT is going to fight it, but you know, with enough council members signing on, I think that should do the trick.
And long term, I mean, not just with DOT, I think the community board should have more of a voice in any project that's specific to their districts, and we should have more of a voice in RFP process. You know, there's a number of things that happen. I know it's totally out of this conversation, but it's very real, and I'm sure most of the districts around the table, there has to be, you know, some community board voice in how things are chosen and then implemented in the district, because it's an impact, and the first phone call is to the community.
I would like to add that not only is the permitting process an issue with DOT, but with also the buildings department. Because for the past, I would say 3 to 4 months, I've been fielding complaints from residents that developers are working on Sundays in our district. And usually there's a letter, and I don't know if any other community board receives that letter, but they would send letters to my office asking for permission to work on a Sunday.
Yes.
On Sundays. And there are times when that permission is not granted, but it's observed by residents that work continues on a Sunday. So the permitting process needs to be reviewed for all agencies, and not just DOT.
Are you saying that they continue to work without having a permit, or they're getting the permit without the community board issuing a letter?
They're not allowed, I don't believe that the bill, and I may be wrong, but I do not believe that the building department will issue a permit for construction work on Sundays. On Sundays, so the developer, whoever that is, usually send a letter to the community requesting that we submit a response to them and the building department as to whether or not they could work on Sunday.
Right. No, it sounded like you're saying that the Department of
She's saying when they
Buildings are
say,
issuing
they say no,
permits
they're working. You're
without-
saying when you say no, they're working.
Yeah.
That's all.
Oh,
Well,
so,
but that's work without a permit.
that's where,
They do
yeah.
have a permit to do the job.
But not on
No,
Sundays.
but not on
Sundays
Sundays.
is
They
special
need, they need a
permit.
variance, right.
I think it all comes
But they
down
go
to.
out and work on Sundays anyway.
So
Right,
that's
right,
not
right.
the DOB's problem, that's actually the developer is,
Well, no, the problem.
is
They
violating.
can get,
his-
yeah, they get violated for those in our district.
Yeah, but it's very difficult on a weekend to get inspectors to go out. And something that we talked about when the buildings department was here a few months ago about the after-hours variances is that, you know, part of the difficulty, the buildings department will reach out to the community boards for an after-hour variance only if there are noise complaints. So if there's a noise complaint associated and the developer has applied for a AHV, an after-hours variance, they will seek input from the community board. But what I find the problem is, in our district, is that if there is not an after-hours variance and work is being done by a contractor, and the contractor knows this, it's very difficult to get inspectors out within a reasonable time period to do the enforcement.
Because
And
it's after
without the
hours.
enforcement, to me, it is, they're aware of it, and they can continue to operate in this way. So unless there's teeth, and unless Buildings Department has the inspectors to dedicate to violations of either it's after hours at night or on the weekends without a permit, the contractors will continue to do it.
Yeah,
right?
that might be a resource issue
Yeah.
then, budget request.
Or, I mean, the other thing is the police department. You know, the police department can enforce stop work orders. They are able to, and there are people on the ground, and I realize, you know, everybody is resource thin, but again, you know, these problems will continue to happen in our districts unless we have teeth and enforcement, because that, to me, is the biggest deterrent. The biggest abidance by the rules and regulations is when the rules are enforced, because you can't have different rules for different people. But without enforcement, the developers will take advantage, because in the end of the day, it's money, and they won't care about the noise complaints to the community, so.
Also with the buildings department, the issue of illegal occupancy of properties where property owners are subdividing their buildings and creating a hazardous condition. And if the buildings department goes out and there's no entrance, then for some reason that violates, that complaint is closed, but it's not resolved.
So I think overall, the issue seems to be, I guess, I'm gonna say lack of notification, lack of outreach from lack of inclusion of the community boards in the process of permits or whatever's going on in our districts. There seems to be this, and there's a hesitancy on the part of the agencies to want to include us in the process.
You slow them down.
You know, they don't want us a part of the process, because then, you know, we can put up a wall, you know, saying, no, you can't do it on this day, or no, you shouldn't do it this time of the year, or, you know, you shouldn't do it as Barry was saying, these two avenues at the same time. Because, you know, we're basically the gatekeepers of our community, so we know what works for our communities. So there seems to be this lack of wanting to include the district managers in any sort of process when it comes to work being done in our districts.
I mean, and I know Barry mentioned that it most likely had to be done through legislation, but we will look to see if there are any other ways that we can, you know, bypass that.
But at one point, I mean, y'all did, this is before me, y'all said at one point you guys were invited to these scope meetings, you know, that were taking place. So I'm not sure if certain things require legislation, I mean, certain things, because it's a policy change within the agencies and trying to get these commissioners to agree to include us back in scoping meetings of projects that's going to take place in the district.
The only reason I said it will require legislation is because I don't think that DOT is inclined to give us the veto power to say do not issue permits during these days. But if they're willing to do that, there's no legislation required. The DOT can issue a directive and say that from now on, community boards get to issue moratoriums.
Well, let's be clear. No mayor is going to want to give community boards that sort of power.
Right.
Going back to you said about RFP, no one's agreeing to that.
But what we're asking, I think, is not so much the power to veto or the power to demand a moratorium in a particular area. We're asking for inclusion. So inclusion would mean...
It's not final say, it's
I'm asking
input
for a
opportunity.
moratorium.
Wait a
Yes.
minute, one moment though.
Barry
because the
won't veto power.
The moratorium and the quote-unquote veto power, right? It
That's what
comes
he
from
wants.
being included in the conversation. So you're helping to plan out the project. So there's no need to talk about an after veto or moratorium being enforced. You're included in the process. So you say during these hours, this is what's happening in my district. So you're at the table to say that this should be included in the
I'm doing that right now. It's not
But I'm
helping.
saying it needs to, that's why I said individually, there are things that are happening and or not happening. But collectively, we need to come up with a way that it's enforced. And I think legislation is the way to go because it should be enforced from the council to those commissioners of those agencies to say, this is a conversation that has to have the community board leadership involved in because they understand their districts. So that those bigger projects are not coming back to bite us, you know. So it's not so much something that happens outside of the planning process of it. Goes back to those meetings, maybe even prior.
And I think that's why there's a section of the charter that speaks about whenever the streets run or if there's notification to the community board. So I think that this, you know, from the creation of community boards, that this has been a big issue. And every you dig the streets, there has to be a 10-day notification, and that's to the community board for, you know, various reasons, because we know our communities best, and we know if there's an event, and a lot has changed in that time. Have, you know, a broad-based computer system, but it doesn't always pick up everything. It doesn't pick up some of the smaller events or other community issues, but I do feel we need to do something different because a lot has changed since I've been DM. We used to be included a lot more. I feel we're not. You know, from the DEP notification to the large projects of being invited to interagencies where we were able to contribute. So there's a lot that has changed, and I think, you know, we really need to, again,
So can we
hit it head
be
on.
very specific as to what we're requesting besides the legislative part? But what is it that we as a group are requesting right now? What is it that we want to see happen like right now? We want Borough Hall to help make happen right now.
Include community boards in consultations, not just notification.
At the minimum.
And there will be times that we will be overruled, but our concerns will be on record. Their overruling of those concerns will be on record. And ultimately, you'll be able to see every community board expresses this same concern, and every time DOT or insert agency here overrules that, maybe there does need to be a shift in approach because it's consistent throughout the borough. So I think you can't gather that insight without the process.
Interagency consultation or scope work includes the agency of community board. So we're not being viewed as such.
Right. Yeah. And scoping is in the charter.
Right, yeah.
You know, it's in the charter.
Right.
How do we get charter compliance, right? It seems simple.
Can
I would like
I?
to ask, I'm sorry.
No, you go.
Just recently, we received a call at Board 5 from National Grid saying that they needed our help in outreach for a project for the
Local Law 30.
The valve?
Yes.
Local Authority 30?
Yes,
I
Local
believe
Law
it
30
is.
compliance.
Thank you. And they said that they've been reaching out to homeowners to make these appointments so that they can have entry to their homes to do the work that coincides on those streets.
Right.
And upon the third, I believe, notification, they were gonna shut off the gas until the homeowner made the appointment, if they didn't get some compliance. This was the first time that we were notified of this particular outreach that they're supposedly doing. In CB5, there's an issue with harassment for homeowners. There's an issue with scams across the city. You know, a lot of our homeowners are still in the senior population, so there's a distrust, and you know, you're not just gonna take some letter that was put on your door and call someone to make an appointment to come into your home. So it just seems really odd that National Grid would try to enforce something like that.
They provide you with a list. I was provided with a list.
When I
so-
requested
Yeah, they gave us
it
a
after
list.
the phone call.
You should
Had
maybe
there not been
have them in for a committee meeting or some sort of like, you know, check-in on their process for that.
So the fact that they even had that type of goal to do something like that is huge.
Yeah,
That's
they
a
have
huge
to, though.
issue.
It's mandated.
So it's a mindset that the agencies have, that this is just the community board. So they only reached out because they wanted help with outreach. They weren't meeting their numbers. Outside of that, they wouldn't have even reached out. And this would have been a call that we'd gotten from some homeowner saying, I have no gas.
Right, that's too bad. When Local Law 30 came to our district, they did come to us in advance. We did have meeting. They did explain, and what we said was if you have any instance where you could not gain access, to reach out to us, and if there was a way that we could do that. We were flooded with calls from seniors, because we have a big senior population in our district, afraid, you know, wanting to make sure that it was, in fact, who they were saying. And so even in the notification, we made sure that they wrote that Local Law 30, and then we had a list. So when a resident called, we had a list of every job. So we looked at the list and confirmed the address, and we said, yes, you are on the list. So we were able to do that in the office.
That's how we did it.
Yeah.
And that happened in every other board.
Yeah, yes, we got it.
Got it. CB5 demands respect.
Do you have you do your district service cabinet meeting?
Yes, and Renee.
She comes?
No.
No, she doesn't come and see me.
Oh.
Yeah, she's inconsistent, yeah.
Oh, you should make a, yeah, you should make a,
And, yeah, we have.
You gotta
But
put your
we're
foot down.
working on it, I don't give up, so. Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Come yours. Sparingly, right, yeah. Only when they need something.
yeah, this is a different one, and it's a very specific issue. Jeremy and I talked about it a little bit. DOT and bike lanes. So there is a problem in our district that I found out is not uncommon, where a bike lane has been installed on alternate side of the street parking days. Cars don't want to block the bike lane, so there's a parked car, there is a bike lane, there's a double parked car, and we can talk about whether or not that's allowed. It's not allowed, the double parking is not allowed, but it's tolerated almost everywhere. And then there's a car that wasn't compliant, it didn't move. So where those three cars are in proximate alignment, the broom can't get through. So then the broom will back down the street. That's not terrible, it's not great. Or if there's traffic behind it, then they call for a supervisor. The supervisor then comes and conducts traffic backward down the street. But if an emergency vehicle is followed, somebody's in trouble. And so DOT recognizes this as a problem. I understand it's citywide. And so they're working on it, but they said, I suggested that that they get word out that you can block the bike lane when you double park. And they said, we can't say that because you're not allowed to double park. So we can't tell you how to break the rule better. But in the meantime, I said, so since you realize you have instituted a public safety hazard, is there currently a moratorium on installing bike lanes? And they said no. So they're not going to figure out how to solve the problem. They're going to perpetuate the problem with no solution in sight. And in my district, it's especially bad between two truck routes. So when they're backing traffic onto Church Avenue and Caton Avenue, there's that additional safety concern. Everybody's nodding their head.
Yeah.
Like, but so, okay, so that's funky too, though. The supervisors at BK14 don't want to enforce because the ticket for double parking is more expensive than the ticket for not complying, so they're going to incentivize non-compliance and not be able to get their brooms down, and then that's their supervisors mad at them for not doing their job. I mean, we could just ask to even up the penalties, but I don't think that's exactly. How do we make them figure it out faster? Rob has an idea.
You know, well, no, I have something that I learned. And I don't know what they're actually doing in my own district. I'll put that out there for humor's sake. But in the 7-7, they just said, can't do that anymore, and you're gonna have to find someplace for your car. On
You're
those.
enforcing the double parking.
Yep.
Yeah, we used to have a strict policy of no double parking in CD14, but it's really relaxed over the past few years. I think as population's grown, or I don't know, COs change. So Rob, do you know if there's been an uptick in the people not moving at all since they're going to get a ticket for double parking?
It does seem that on those mornings when I'm at my mother's, that people have figured out a way to manage car ownership other than double parking with the bike lane between the two lanes of parked cars.
Certainly. So
For an hour and a half?
It's you jam if you do and you jam if you're not.
Yeah, in my district, a lot of people feel it's cheaper to just not move the car. Because it's, I think, a $45 summons versus for
100.
blocking a bike lane, $175 or whatever it is.
Yeah, they can
And
technically
double
get
parking.
two tickets for that, right? The bike lane?
The bike lane and
Yeah, the
double parking.
Sean, I would strongly oppose any idea of ticketing people for double parking during alternate side.
In your district?
In my district,
So you deal with
yes.
that over there?
No, I thought you were talking about making it zero tolerance everywhere. Just in your district?
She's saying she don't know what the solution is. She's not saying the ticket for double parking.
Solution is not installing any bike lanes till you figure out how you're going to still be able to not, you know, impede the work of other agencies. DOT.
Oh, I don't have any bike lanes in my district.
You don't have any bike lanes in your district? Wow.
No. Not as long as I'm DM, no bike lanes in my district.
The solution in my district would be to simply enforce parking regulations underneath the Gowanus Expressway so we could open up all those parking spaces, but they're never going to do that.
So, now that we have everybody here, the responses came out from the capital expense responses, and I'm just wondering.
Can you talk to the mic?
I'm sorry, I don't know that it's on, is it? Yeah, okay. I can't hear, I'm getting
I
old.
think, hang on.
I'm wondering what everybody thought of the responses. I had an instance where one particular agency seemed to pull A, B, or C out of a hat and didn't realize what was happening in the district or in their agency. And I'm wondering if everybody else found that to be true as well. For example, DEP. We put in requests, I mean, infrastructure is a big issue in Bensonhurst, and we had put in multiple requests for DEP-related infrastructure upgrades, and the answers that came out were that residents should call 311.
Yeah.
311.
You were not
I mean, on its face, I was furious at the response, but then when I looked at the locations, DEP actually made the repairs that we requested. So it seemed that nobody knew what was going on internally. So I was just looking for a feel. I mean, we went through many, many meetings with different agencies in OMB on better quality responses, and I feel that we put in a tremendous amount of work, and to receive those responses was just basically a slap in the face. So I was just looking for more input from the other boards.
Same, Marnie, and DEP is a really good example of it because we have had a flooding issue on Church and Coney Island Avenue that we've been working on for years. There's been site visits with the council member, all sorts of things. DEP and Department of Parks actually went through an exercise of trying to get the DPR lines flushed in order to not contribute to the city lines. So there's been work on it and some progress, but when we put it in our budget request, it was something like that residents should call 311. And it's, you know, our folder is this thick. We have substantiated that it's an issue.
Absolutely, and most of the residents call 311 and the community board, and it's well documented, and I just don't understand why they were so dismissive if we're looking to work together to further the improvements in our district, so.
Just clicking on a drop-down menu.
Yeah.
I feel that way too. I think we put great care into those budget priorities. Our board, you know, we put a lot of energy and input to provide this to the agencies. Right. We went to trainings. We tried to develop a new system, which I think had a lot of positives to it. But to have just these cookie cutter responses that don't, you know, contact the agency. Well, we did contact you. You are the agency. is a little bit insulting to the work that we've put on and really not responsive to the needs of the district that we're presenting to the agency. So I don't know how we, you know, I think we should work on changing that. I mean, but we've tried a few times in bringing the agency people to a meeting, and we haven't been able to get the right people who are making those budget decisions. I think that's what maybe we could add to our list.
So I would say no appreciable difference. I keep telling my board members, what's the point of putting anything for parks on here? Because we always get the same answer. Ask your elected officials, we have no money. So it's worthless to add anything for parks. And the one that gets me every year, DEP and DOT project supposed to reconstruct Fifth Avenue in my district. Since 1988, delayed every 5 years, says this project needs more study.
I found an article from 1995 recently in my office saying that they were going to finish my fifth section of Fifth Avenue and move on to Sunset Park. 1995.
They didn't give a time frame, right? Any time in the
No.
next 2 centuries?
And the iguanas, don't forget, Jeremy.
So, I mean, you all talked about a lot of different things, so I think it's important for us maybe to prioritize what you want to tackle, you know, first. So I'm just going to recap and let me know if I've missed something.
Could I bring up one more thing?
Sure.
And I just brought this up to DOT this morning, and I brought it up to them last week and the week before. They give me projects the day of a presentation, and I won't accept that anymore. People then complain to my office that we're withholding information from them because they don't get a chance to look at a project before DOT presents it and then wants a vote. So we're refusing to vote on anything. We have meetings on that night, and we're telling DOT that they have to give us presentations 2 weeks in advance or we're not going to schedule the meeting, and I would hope some others would take that on as well.
To that point, Jeremy, I get the feeling that there is a real disconnect between 55 Water and all 5 of the Borough Commissioner's offices, and that that 16 Court Street doesn't get, 16 Court Street, it seems to me, often gets a few hours more notice than the community boards do. So it's a real, you know, I'm not to contradict your request and your suggestion, but I think it's going to be a major management change at 55 Water Street in order for them to comply with that kind of a timetable, because it seems like programmatic staff are working on these things right up until lunch, and then they email them to Keith, and then they come out that night and present it. And if that's the way they're working, they're gonna be really hard pressed to meet it earlier.
In this particular case, they told me in October, we're ready to meet with you. And they were still doing the study 2 days before they presented to us.
In what month?
Last month. So, yeah, beginning of January.
And isn't that fine? I mean, what Jeremy's doing is now managing DOT's expectations. You can give me your presentation at any point that it's ready, but don't expect my board to vote on it for another 30 to 45 days. So if you're asking our board, and we have this right now with a plaza proposal, if you're asking our board to vote on this in time for you to get this in the chute for the spring, get it to us on time, or else you'll be doing it in the fall.
They got us to vote on the 4th Avenue bike lanes in my district, and we voted in favor of it. They're not done with the study.
I also had the experience where
I didn't vote.
they're ready one month, they're not ready the following month, they're ready again the third month, and then they withdraw it completely on the fourth month. And it is, it seems that under the current administration, work is very confused at DOT.
Well, they start with their conclusion. I'm convinced of this. They start with their conclusion, and they build the study around that.
So I'll go over the things that I heard. I heard to include the CBs in consultation, not just notifications. Having a meeting with the utility companies and contractors. In terms of budget, the software for the CB offices, DEP notifications, issue with DOT and the bike lanes. We need the right people from DEP who make the right budget decisions. And the last thing I heard was on DET giving projects the day of presentation and not before.
So on about the budget, our capital expense budget, right, because we have to stop having the liaisons in here. If we're talking budget and money, then the people from the budget department, they're the ones who have to be here if we're asking them to come and talk about budget priorities. You know, not Ben from DOB. He has no idea about the money and where the money's going. It has to be people from the budget department from those agencies who can tell us, yeah, we have money for this project, or we may have money for your project, but we don't have money for your project. You know, their money is allocated a certain way, you know, to these, they do get a budget, the agencies, for capital and expense, and then they decide which boards are getting what, okay? So we need the budget people here.
So in terms of priority, what would you,
So,
in terms of tackling first?
a couple of things just to kind of tease out your list. On the consultation, not notification, I think we have to be clear about where we're asking for that, and that kind of goes to the inclusion in the, are they monthly, weekly meetings that we used to, the monthly planning meetings? What are those called, those meetings? Scoping?
Well, how did it go? Tell us, how did it go in the past?
Yeah. Meeting.
Mm-hmm.
On their permanent process for
Right there.
Grid, Con Ed, all the utilities.
And you guys used to go to those meetings?
No, we never went to those meetings. What we went to were the DDC planning meetings
DDC ones.
for large capital projects.
Projects. Okay.
Those meetings we were invited to. That has stopped. And that was
And
usually.
that has stopped.
Yes, that was a few months before the project commenced. Now we don't find out sometimes until the shovel's in the ground, unless you're very proactive, which I've tried to be now on the NYC map, to look at any upcoming projects that are coming up that'll be on the map, not always. But it was the DDC meetings that were led and run by DDC that we were invited to, and those were an interagency meeting with the utilities, with the MTA, with all of the agencies around the table, and the community board always had a seat at those meetings.
And that was if a particular project was taking place in your specific district?
Correct.
Okay, that's what we're requesting.
So, well, it sounds like I'm hearing two things. I'm
there are two
hearing
things.
inclusion with DDC on major projects,
Correct.
but I think we also discussed having more consultative, having more input when DOT issues street opening permits.
Yes.
And as far as priority, I think those are two things that will take a really, really long time to make any progress on, and so the sooner we just start the ball rolling, the better.
I mean, but there's probably some low-hanging fruit that we could deal with, that we probably could get some resolution to.
The software thing is already in progress, so I think,
Okay.
yeah.
They had mentioned earlier before some of you got here about the 3-on-1, the visit to 3-on-1. Are we still looking to do that?
Yeah. I
3-on-1
think we-
headquarters?
I would love to.
I'm just asking. I don't know.
Yes, yes, they're redesigning the whole 311. There might even be switching platforms or companies. Maybe we should just check and see where they are with that. But Laura, that's perfect. That
This is
fits
a
into
perfect
all of
time,
this.
yeah.
If they're actually looking at how they're going to redo it and for us to be putting in what we need out of it would be useful.
I think that really would be, because I think we all know some 311 glitches in the current systems that if we have this opportunity, that might be a good priority to do.
By the way, a question, since we're talking 3-in-1, has any of you gotten lately calls from residents saying that 3-in-1 told them to call the community board?
All the time. Every
Which I'm glad.
Yeah.
We get them patched directly over.
The numbers have gone up.
Oh, for sure.
It used to be an occasional call, now it's an almost daily call.
We get it patched directly over because we're in HRA and they have it display, the call comes in as 311.
Wow.
So we know exactly when it's a 311.
I mean, so we have to get to the bottom of why 3-in-1 is telling residents to call the community board, because we're just going to turn around. I mean,
We need a
first of
complaint
all, when a
number.
resident calls and says, I got this problem, and I say, call 3-in-1, put in the system, and they're telling me, well, 3-in-1 told me to call you, that's
No, I think
I see,
they're
I
the
don't
more
mind that.
complicated issues in my board. You know, if you have a resident that's called 311 for an illegal parking situation that continues to exist and their jobs are being closed out by PD, and the 311 operator saying contact the community board because perhaps we can build that and find out what's going on. I mean, that's just an example. The
Does
calls that-
3-in-1 know a history when somebody calls with a problem like that?
Well, if the person says, usually the resident has said, I've called 25 times on this, and it keeps getting closed out, and I think that triggers something in their, because I find that it's people who have recurring problems who are, and it's the same issue that's recurring. And after the 5th or 6th call, 311 says, why don't you contact the community board? And usually they're a little bit more complicated. They're recurring pothole conditions, or they're recurring illegal parking conditions, or noise. Noise is a big one that has been coming to us.
Problem is that when they do that, they do not route it to the specific agency that it needs to get routed to, and there's no record of it.
Yeah, if
That's
it's
the
done,
problem.
if it's done by email, I have a 311 number ascribed to that complaint, but you're right, there's no way of tracking it, especially the noise complaints, because the police department, and when we review an SLA license, we look to that 311 data, so I say to the resident, continue to call 311, and then you could also reach out to us with that number so we can continue to log it.
Yeah, but that does give you the opportunity to say that to the, I mean, I
It
like
does. I
getting the
like
call,
it.
I prefer getting those calls, and if we do have to refer them back to 311, we can guide them in how to word it, so it gets, funneled properly and all of that. So I think that's a positive trend.
I just saw an increase.
Yeah, totally. It's surprising. And that's really astute of you to sort of notice the pattern of the types of
I
calls.
had maybe a feeling that they're trying to circumvent sending it to the specific agencies and just dumping it on us, but if you guys feel that it's
some
not
utility.
nefarious.
Okay, so can we get
Yeah,
to
back to
the
that.
priorities?
Priorities,
Well,
yeah.
let's do the low-hanging fruit. Let's try to get that.
Low-hanging fruit.
So you had the software follow-up in the 311 visit, right?
No, these are all pretty heavy lifts. The DEP and the budget responses, I think that's really not just an agency issue. I think budget responses, that goes back to OMB and to city planning, which put us on a path to a new and improved process that just hasn't become improved. I mean, it's new, but not improved. So I think going back to the drawing board with those two agencies.
They concurred, but the quality just wasn't there. And we'll put that in our letter of response.
Yeah, good. We should all do that. We should all make sure that we
And if, just on a tangent, and following Jeremy's lead, which he's been saying this for 2 or 3 years now, I have invited my board to change their parks priorities from this park, this project, this park, to an expense budget item of the city needs to figure out a different way to fund capital projects for parks. Because that seems, you know, if the answer is always, we don't have our own money and you should go ask your elected officials, then clearly we need another system. Because there's no point talking about any individual park if that is consistently the answer.
The DOT bike lanes thing, I don't think we need to necessarily keep on this. I don't know if there's anything, I mean, DOT recognizes that a problem, they're trying to address it. I don't know if unless other people think that we need to do a full court press, but.
If we can just stress to DOT that pedestrian safety doesn't always include a bike lane. That every safety plan is inclusive of a bike lane. All of a sudden. Maybe not all of a sudden.
I concur.
Did we mention the CRM at all, the customer relation management tool, at the
Yes.
very beginning?
It looks like they're going first for the board stat, for whatever that's going to help. It's just more data, centralized data instead of whatever, so, but they're saying that from that, the CRM will grow out of that, hopefully. I don't know why we have to take, since you brought it up, I'm just gonna, I don't know why we have to take steps upon steps upon steps, and we're gonna get board staff, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. Why can't we just go directly to a CRM, hire a company to do a CRM, and be done with it? I don't know, but, I mean, we're doing this because Gail Brewer did it in Manhattan, so we're gonna get more data. What do we have with the data? We need to service our constituents. That's the point here. We're going to have more data and more data and more data. The data that we're going to have with board stat is available already. Just have to go to a different place. We need a CRM, but they promise that we're going to get the board stat, we're going to get the CRM out of that. Listen, to be honest, I don't think that's going to happen. We've been asking for this for, I mean, I've been asking this for 4 years. Probably district managers that were here before me have been asking it for longer than that. I just don't see why we keep accepting the city just pushing the ball and pushing the ball and pushing the ball and kicking the can down the road. I mean, now we're going to work on board stat, and fine, and when we get board stat, what are we going to have? We're going to have more data to look at. That's all we're going to have. It's frustrating. I mean, and we got placated. Oh, these guys are going to do board stat, and it's working so good in Manhattan. What's it doing in Manhattan? What? They're seeing data? We can get data. We can get data. We can log into all different. We have an open data. We have.
I see no reason why we can't have both. I mean,
I'm saying.
I think
I'm
there's
fine.
a value in data, but I don't see why we have to wait for one for the other, and why we can't ask for them, both together. And I see no reason in that. And I don't think we should give up on the CRM. I think we have to continue. I mean, that is very important.
So what's the step? Is the step bring in and do it? Is it, what's the step to get that?
I think we need to bring and do it. I don't understand. If council members have this software, why don't we have it? This is
Looked like they gave up on do it. That's why they brought in this beta NYC.
Well, I don't think we should,
I think historically, and if I remember correctly, Sean, we met with DOT and MOA, and we spoke about our needs for a CRM type system. And I don't think they feel it's a priority for the boards. I mean, you have to remember, I don't know if any of you would remember, right? And Jeremy, 20 years ago, you didn't have a computer. And we didn't have internet. So their priorities, we're just not high on their radar for that. And I think that's why we circumvented do it, to go another route.
But that's not getting us to the promised land. We're getting more data now. We circumvented do it to get.
I think they needed to set that up to incorporate it. That was my understanding. No?
Yeah, that's what they said.
That's what they said, that they had to start at a point and then they could add the module to add into that. No?
There's no module to add in. It's what board stat is.
We would need clarification on that, because, I mean,
I asked them.
And you,
It's definitely not a CRM. We can get maybe a CRM out of this, but that's not what they're working on.
It feels like everything we talked about today, and as hearing this anew, tell me if it strikes you like this. we have a cultural problem where it seems like community boards are being treated like an impediment to efficiency rather than a partner in progress. And so how to communicate that we're not asking for information and for opportunities for input in order to make any other agency's job more difficult. Ultimately, it should create, even if you have to take a step back in order to do things more fluidly, ultimately it should help the city do its job better in the communities, which I think is ultimately our mission, no? So I think that's underlying all of these issues, it seems to me.
Is there anything else to be left out? Anything else you want to add?
Did you mention the permits that we discussed? Building department.
Yeah, I think that'll falls into the consultation on identification.
Right, yeah.
I have a question. When Andrew was running these meetings previously, I think that we had slotted in, I think he slotted in an hour and a half. And then when the deputy borough president was running the meetings, they got longer. Is there a game plan for length of meetings? Are we playing it by ear, or are we trying to stick to a program?
Sure, I mean, what worked for you?
Hour and a half.
Yeah, okay, all right. So that's fine.
Is anybody on board with starting at 10? I'm just going to raise it since we're talking about time.
Either way.
I defer to you, Henry.
Considering
Just that you're closer than we are.
I had people saving up like for ransom payments.
Are we
Half-hour
going?
drive this morning from Mill Basin.
I know there was a discussion about, I guess, a discrepancy in the meeting schedule, so I'm going to resend that, because I think initially it had tomorrow as the February meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll resend that. And the next meeting is Wednesday, March 13th, which is just for you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, you got to bring us breakfast. That's what
Don't hold your breath now.
I could just supply the water, that's it.
Agua, water.
Okay, Barry, I'll see you.
Water is essential.
Is anybody going to the mayor's, you're going tonight?